Today, we continue to hear of the silent witnesses who were there participating in the crucifixion of Jesus in unique ways. We now hear from the shroud.
Excuse me. As you may have heard, we are gathering information from witnesses to the crucifixion of the one called Jesus. We were told that you played a significant role in the events of those 3 days. Could you please share with us your perspective on those events?
I know that you have already heard from other silent witnesses. Perhaps you have even found their accounts fascinating. It seems to me that some of it would be hard to believe. I guess I would have difficulty accepting them as accurate too, except for the fact that I also participated in that historic event. If I hadn't been so close to the events myself, well, maybe I had better just tell you what happened.
Perhaps you could begin, as the other witnesses have, by telling us a little bit about yourself.
I think you ought to know that I came from a very humble beginning. After being scattered among with many flax seeds, I grew to be a slender, straight flax plant with beautiful blue flowers. It's difficult to find something as stunning as the natural beauty of the flowers of the earth, even the flowers of plants that seem to be weeds for many people. It's amazing, too, what changes can take place that make the common precious, the average valuable, the simple elaborate. That's what happened to me.
Even though you started out as a weed?
Yes, I did start as a simple weed in the fields, but I was selected, along with many, many others, to be carefully prepared for a special purpose. You see, with the proper care and preparation, what seems to be no more than a somewhat pretty weed in the fields can be turned into a gift fit for a queen. I had wondered as I grew if I would become more than a simple plant. How excited I was when I was picked, literally, to be woven into flax, they're woven into linen. That's what they do with some flax, you know. They make us into linen.
Linen? That is really impressive.
It may surprise you to know that linen is often as fine and smooth as silk, and it can have a beautiful shine and amazing strength. This comes about by all of us individual plants of the field being properly prepared and working together. There is a spinning and a weaving that takes place, and the plants become threads, and the threads become the beautiful, strong piece of linen.
Is there a lesson in all of that?
Yes, one could say that people could take a lesson from us. It has been said that some people are simply happy to grow tall and let their blossoms bloom for all to see. The sad part is that they are unwilling to allow themselves to be gathered with others in order to become more beautiful, more useful, and stronger. For some, it is difficult to give up themselves in that way. But oh, what a fantastic difference when the spinning and the weaving are finished. But becoming a piece of linen is only one part of the miraculous change and use made of former flax plants. Once the change has taken place through the skilled hands of spinners and weavers, there are any number of ways we can be used.
Used?
Many pieces of linen are used to adorn the tables in palaces during the grand banquets that are commonplace among those in positions of authority. Some of us linen is used to hang and display our beauty for all to see. Other pieces of linen are used to make clothes to cover the bodies of those who can afford us. You see, linen is not only very nice and pleasant to the eyes, but linen is cool as well. And in this area of the world, cool is in demand. So as you can see, it is one thing to be transformed from flax into linen, but then there is the anticipation of how one will finally be used. Personally, I had hoped to be a fine garment wrapped around the body of a king, a prince, or a queen. Then again, I've always had high expectations, considering that I began as a simple plant of the field.
I appreciate your beginnings and certainly agree that expectations don't always agree with one's eventual reality. But could you please tell us your story?
Apparently, my hopes were too high. I found that out when my use was finally made clear. It was a blow to my ego, if linen can have such things. Maybe I had better just tell you what happened.
Please do.
A man named Joseph, I believe he was from Arimathea, came in asking for a piece of linen. At first glance, I was excited. I knew it was my turn to be sold since I was now on top of the stack. Well, this man Joseph was very well dressed. I assumed he was a person of high position. I found out that he was a member of the council. That means he was a leader among the church officials. Knowing that, my mind raced with thoughts of adorning a fine table or hanging to be appreciated by those who gazed at my silken sheen and beautiful weeds. I could picture myself draped over the noble body of this man or his wife. I knew I was about to become famous. I was right, in a way. I was wrong, too.
I don't understand.
This man Joseph told the shopkeeper that he needed a piece of linen to be used as a burial shroud. Can you imagine the cold and drafty, damp feelings that shot through my fibers at that moment? Here I had seen myself as an important part of nobility or royalty, only to find out that I was about to be wrapped around a corpse and buried away in a dark, damp tomb, never to be seen or appreciated again.
How humiliating.
How utterly degrading. I wished that I had been left in the field to die and go to seed. At least then I would have served a purpose and would have left my mark on the face of the earth. But to be stuck away in a hole?
It's enough to unravel even the finest linen.
The sale was completed and I was taken from the shop. Shortly we met up with a man named Nicodemus, another member of the council. He and Joseph seemed a bit ill at ease. I found out later that what they were about to do could get them in a lot of trouble with the other members of this council.
More humiliation?
Anyway, Nicodemus had bought about 100 pounds of myrrh and aloes. It was the custom to wrap a body of linen and place spices and aloes between the wrapped layers. This was supposed to preserve the body somewhat. It was certain now that I was to be wrapped around a body and stuffed with all these spices. What if I'm allergic to them? Nobody bothered to think about that. I finally accepted that my hopes were gone, my usefulness a sham, and my purpose. Will you call this a purpose? Not me. Then things got even worse.
Worse?
That's right, things got worse. I was set down on the ground so that the two men could get the body I was to be wrapped around. And here's where it got worse. The body was hanging on a cross. I was to wrap the corpse of a criminal who had been crucified. Why didn't they just toss him into the pit over there? Or let him be prey for the birds the way they did with others who had been crucified? After all, criminals weren't entitled to a burial. Why was this man special? He didn't look special. He just looked dead. Well, they got him down and began to wrap me around it. I had to be used in strips. That's the Jewish custom for burial. Strips of linen with layers of myrrh and aloes between.
This sounds quite different from the other accounts we have heard. Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm certainly not doubting your story. It's just that what happened to you was very different. Please go on.
Remember how I told you that my beginning was unique? That I had come from being a simple plant and was turned into fine linen?
Yes?
I also told you that I had high hopes of possibly serving a use for nobility, or even wrapping around a king to dress him in finery to keep him cool.
You did.
And I also told you that I had given up all hope of any of that happening. I said that, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Well, I don't know how to help you understand, but I'm just going to tell you how it was, and you can wrestle with the confusion. That's what I've had to do.
Okay.
Here's what happened. When the body of the crucified man first touched me, there was a sensation that passed through all of my strands and bridged the gaps in my weave. It was as though I was being fused into one solid mass, a mass with strength beyond the strength of common or even fine linen, a mass with a sheen beyond that of the finest silk, a softness so as to surpass the flesh of an infant. Now, one would not expect such a sensation from touching a dead body, would you?
I wouldn't.
It was clear that this couldn't be the body of an average criminal who was crucified. This was someone with special powers or purpose. There was no doubt that the man was dead. Yet there was this sensation which would made me feel alive and stronger, while he lay dead and weak as I was carefully wrapped around him. Are you still with me?
I think so.
If you're finding this hard to understand, imagine how I felt. All of a sudden, I felt that being able to touch this man and serve as his shroud was far more important than any other use I could have ever imagined. I knew that I had been set apart from the time I was shooting up as a sprout in the field. I was not just one of the flax of the earth. I was a small part of a great plan to accomplish something magnificent. I never imagined in my wildest dreams that something as simple as meat could be put to such an important use. But I knew that it was true. I didn't understand it, but I knew it. I could feel it through every fiber of my being. Finally, I was completely bound around the body. I pressed tightly against his lifeless flesh. There was no movement, no breathing, no trace of a heart beating. He was indeed without life. How shameful.
Shameful.
I had no idea who this man had been, but if in death he had the power to change and affect me as he did, can you imagine what he could have or must have done for human beings when he was alive?
If only he could have lived longer and changed more people.
It is probably not my place to second-guess the God who created this power-filled man, and even created me as simple flax. How thankful I am, though, that God saw fit to allow me, as a humble piece of linen, to come in contact with such a great, life-changing person as this crucified one. Even though I was confused about all of these events, there was a sense of confidence and security as I was allowed to hold his precious body, resting in death. Even though I knew he was truly dead, there was a feeling that it wasn't over yet, a feeling that there was more to happen, an excitement that replaced the usual depression expected at a time like this.
How do you mean?
I no longer felt myself to be a useless rag wrapping a corpse. Rather, I felt as though I was being used for a very special purpose, one that I might never understand, but I was content to accept that and be thankful for it.
Oh, how unbelievable that feeling must have been, to be so close to the crucified one.
We were moved into a grave which had never been used before, the crucified one and I, that is, and laid to rest. We were sealed tightly inside by a huge stone. Darkness, quiet, and emptiness surrounded us. We lay motionless for a couple of days, I guess, and then, I don't know if I should even say it.
Say it, please.
We were lying as still as death itself, and I felt a movement. I figured that it must be another earthquake. What else could be moving in a grave? The movement was slight. It was a tugging, a straining against me. It was as though the body I held was trying to expand, as it would if breath were trying to re-enter it. It was a rhythmic movement, as though the silenced heart were pumping once again, pumping life back into the limp body. Yes, that was it. It was the movement of life. I had no sooner realized what it was when I found myself alone on the slab.
Alone?
I was still in the same place, holding the spices as I had been, but I did not surround a body anymore. Something beyond imagination had occurred, something I cannot explain. I can only tell you, as an eyewitness, it happened. And I, a simple flax plant transformed into linen, had been transformed into a shroud of life. I didn't give life to the crucified one, mind you, but I was allowed to serve him by holding him only as long as he chose to be held. He was never really bound by me. And now, so I hear, neither are you. He is free from what held him, and so are you. I used to think death was the end. Obviously, it's only the beginning.
Obviously.